governing board meeting. The next item for our discussion on our agenda is reorganization of the governing board. To move through this agenda item, I thought we would start with board discussion, then hear from the community before we take action. I did want to acknowledge that there was some concern that we should maybe table this, and I think that is recommended action we could consider. But I want to make sure that the people who have invested the time to be here tonight have an opportunity to speak to this item. I would have liked, just to give context to those who are here, reorganization of the governing board typically happens in January. This hasn't really happened in recent history in Creighton as far as anyone that I know can remember. And I would have liked the governing board member who requested this item to discuss it and provide context why we're having this tonight. She unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. So I would like to open this up to the governing board for any comments you all might have before I speak and before we hear from the community members who have submitted cards.
The fact that the full board is present, I would like to move to table this to the next meeting. I would like to hear from those who invested the time to speak tonight or put in a sheet for all board members to read one or the other. But I would like to hear from I move that we table this.
Okay, there has been a movement after consulting with legal on how to proceed. She suggested we hear from everyone, and then we can, if there's a second, we can vote on that. Any other board members like to add comments at this time?
Do we need to second in order to move forward with the discussion?
We don't.
Or to hear public comment?
No. In fact, there could be the possible outcomes. There could be a motion. There could be no motion. This is just a reserved time for us to speak to this agenda item. I would suggest that since the first motion was to table it, if there's a second, that's the first motion that this board will entertain on action to proceed. Okay. So before I call on the community, I'd like to make some comments. I'd like to take a moment to share context on this particular issue. Our tradition in Creighton has been to make these organizational decisions in January, as prescribed by law. To the best of my knowledge, this has always been the case in Creighton and for school boards in general. That makes tonight's action a referendum on my leadership as governing board president, and I'd like to take an opportunity to share my point of view. I wanted to serve on this governing board because I wanted to make a positive difference for our kids in our district. After teaching for 2 years in a district right down the road, and after spending years talking to parents about education at the restaurants that I ran right up the road, I sought an opportunity to join this board, to join you all in being collaborative and making positive decisions for our kids and for our community. And I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but we have accomplished a lot together. I think we've created a better educational program for our kids and for our community. And we've recognized as a board we can't do this alone. We've invested in our community in big decisions along the way. As a board, we've supported and empowered our superintendent with comprehensive reform, with our partnership with Ellis and West Ed, with investing our parents through academic parent-teacher teams, and by focusing all our decisions on the impact it has on kids. And as a result, our students are posting some of the most impressive academic gains in the entire state. As board president, I've helped build strong relationships with our public leaders downtown. I've helped tell our story nationally. I've respected each governing board member with the time they needed to share their points of view. This board organization has worked. And in order for our governing board to continue to move in this direction, there needs to be a renewed confidence from our community in our governing board. My work as a board member has been a labor of love. I've spent the past 4 years attending board meetings, various committee meetings, visiting classrooms at every school, going to school events and basketball games, and talking with parents whenever I could. Though this takes me away from my family, from my wife and daughter, these decisions I've made have always been towards setting high standards for our students and for our community. I want us to continue to build on the successes we've had as a district governing board, and we have to do this as a community. I believe the president of the governing board should value community investment, and in the interest of our greater mission, I think it'd be useful for us to hear now from those present in the meeting. First card I have is Amy McSheffrey. Ms. McSheffrey, will you come to the podium? Please state your name and address, and limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Amy McSheffrey, and I live at 4417 North 38th Street in Phoenix, which is in the Creighton District. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I would just like to speak on Carl's behalf, the president of the board. Right now, reorganization of the governing board, I think, has nothing to do with what's best for our students. I think it's about an upset governing board member unjustly seeking retribution for being removed from the ballot for not obtaining enough signatures. In order to run any race in any position nationwide, a viable candidate must obtain a set amount of signatures. It's standard practice for citizens to challenge petitions of candidates and initiatives. And I think it's expected in regular elections that people care about. For aspiring candidates in Creighton, you only need to receive 0.5% of total registered voters in the district. That's 101 out of 20,091 registered voters. Carl checked the signatures of all the candidates running in Creighton, and 2 people failed to get enough signatures. I think Carl is a very good board member. The way I got to know Carl was when I was dealing with the name change process from Squaw Peak Traditional Academy to Biltmore Preparatory Academy. As a parent at that school, that process was very upsetting to me and many other parents. And I know that was another thing that, that really doesn't affect our children's lives, but I'll tell you, it affected the lives of the parents and the politics of that school, and it still is an upsetting matter at that school and really divided our community. I wrote a letter with my concerns. Carl was the only person to call me from the school board and talk to me about it. And I was so impressed and moved by that. It really gave me faith in your board as a whole. And I wish I had heard from other members of the school board, because it was a really important issue to our community. So I think Carl is a great leader in that. He took the time to do that, and I know I wasn't the only person he talked to, and I know he's been to every school in the district. I've seen him at events all the time. I've seen him at our school many times and many other district-wide events. So I think it's important that Carl stay on as president for the rest of his term. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next card I have is for Mr. David Zook. Mr. Zook, will you please state your name and address and limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please?
You got it. David Zook, 3517 East Meadowbrook Avenue in the Biltmore Prep boundaries. I've had a few exchanges with Robin over the past couple of days, email-wise. My initial email to her was really trying to figure out the motivation of her putting this on the agenda with only 5 meetings left. She didn't want to disclose her grievances email. She said that she would be here tonight to air those out. It's unfortunate that she is not here. My last email to her, I thanked her for her honesty, and she said that she's not going to air out grievances. And I told her, that I emailed her back, I said, I just don't think this really makes a lot of sense. Unless Carl's under an official investigation for like embezzlement or gross misconduct, something of those, I could see why you would want to remove him as president and possibly even board member. But absent of that, 5 meetings left, he's a lame duck, he's not running again. I just didn't see the point in pursuing that, and I tried to press her a little on her motivation, which she would not disclose. I do understand that he did, as Amy said, pull signatures for all 4 candidates who are currently running, and she was one of the ones who failed in getting the proper amount of signatures. There was a court date. I know that Carl and Amy, from what I understand, went to the court date. Robin was not there. I don't know why she wasn't there. But from a citizen looking at the evidence, what I know right now, to me, it seems like revenge. That she's striking back at a board member because he is trying to uphold the integrity of the voting process. And I think that is right. I think that is constitutional. I don't see any problem with that at all. So my question to you, because I imagine you guys are going to table this tonight and discuss it and vote on it next time. But I just want to ask this question. What is the message that you guys are going to send if you choose to vote Carl off? Because from what I understand, it seems like a grievance unless she comes back with some gross misconduct or what have you, right? If you were to vote him off, is this the way that we would encourage students within the Creighton district to handle conflict? One person gets mad because the other person stands up and does what is right, so they strike back with revenge. Would that be acceptable for the staff or for the administrators to act that way? And I think that all of us, being reasonable, intelligent people, would say, no, that's not the way to handle conflict. There are other ways to do it. So if there is a conflict between Robin and Carl, I think that they ought to seek a way to work that out without going this route, because it's going to send a horrible message to the people of Creighton, and it's going to reflect very poorly, I believe, on who you guys are as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zook. Next card is for Mr. Scott Yanni. Mr. Yanni, will you please state your name and address and limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please?
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Scott Yanni of 3825 East Camelback. I am a second grader at VPA Fly Program. I also am a product of the Creighton School District. I attended Monte Vista from second grade through sixth grade and then at Creighton Middle School. I've spoken to all of you at the board a few times last year, and I asked the board to actually listen to what some of the parents and community members have to say this evening before rendering a decision. It is my opinion from those last meetings that the board tends to make their decisions prior to letting anyone voice their opinion, and you let us speak just to shine us on. My case in point would be the disaster last year that led the name change from Squaw Peak to VPA. I hope this evening will be different. I'm here to speak on behalf of Carl Zaragoza, who is a great board member and a great president, and the only governing board member to visit all the schools within the school district more than once to learn and experience how the decisions affect our kids and how the school board will impact our kids' hardworking education. Carl is one of our biggest cheerleaders, not only within the schools by attending events, but also with legislators, and especially with the chairman of the Education Committee, both in the House and the Senate here at the state. He was able to get a full chapter dedicated to Shane Creighton's AP, TTT, and nationally published book, Achievable Dream, College Board's Lessons in Creating Great Schools. As stated previously, Creighton has no history of reorganizing the governing board mid-year. This is typically done in January and traditionally has been upheld over the years despite conflicts of personalities or disagreements among other board members. I asked the board to remember it was us, the parents, and the community who put them in their positions, and I feel that tabling this issue to another meeting would be a great, huge disservice not only to the community, but also to the Creighton School District. Carl should serve his term out as president. He has done a great job. He's done a great job of leading and representing Creighton. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yanni. Our last card is Ms. Lara Eklund. Ms. Eklund, will you please state your name and address and limit your presentation to 5 minutes, please?
My name is Lara Eklund and my address is 3219 East Camelback Road. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here tonight to discuss the agenda item, reorganization of the governing board. When I heard this was on the agenda, 3 things immediately came to mind. Number 1, time. I'm not sure that this is the time to discuss this item for 2 specific reasons. Number 1, tonight was supposed to be about student achievement, and I'm impressed and actually applaud the decision to put student achievement above this agenda item. Number 2, the board will be reorganized organically in January, as 3 of the current board members will not be returning. The second thing that came to mind, professionalism. Ultimately, you are all professionals and should be able to work together as such, regardless of your differences. As a professional, I am required to work with people that I may have fundamental disagreements with, but I don't ask that they are removed from my team. I don't ask to be placed somewhere else. Problems are solved through discussion and sometimes compromise, but most of all, they are handled professionally. Number 3, a governing board presence. I am honored to know that 3 of the 5 board members, either personally, professionally, or both. I've seen 3 members of the school board at school events such as convocations, fall festivals, basketball games, football games, and the such. One board member has even sought me out personally to gain a teacher's perspective on such hot-button topics as the extended day in teacher retention. As a member of our school board, I believe you should attend these events and seek out information from the very people that you represent. These board members, the ones putting themselves out there and getting involved, are the ones that let me know they have a vested interest in serving the board and the schools that that board represents. In closing, I implore you to put your differences aside or to work them out. But don't take time for more important matters such as how to better serve our parents, schools, and students. We deserve your undivided, and I mean undivided, attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eklund. Ladies and gentlemen, I've presented my own comments. You've heard from the community. The motion that Donna made was to table this to decide at a future board meeting. Is there a second for that motion?
Just preliminary for your discussion. If we were to vote, I've never been accused of having a quiet voice, but thank you for this one. If we were to put this, if we were to take no action and this were to essentially die, or if we ended up with no motion, it would die, would it not?
It would die for tonight. So per the legal advice of our district attorney, Jennifer McLennan, a number of things can happen. This can be tabled and decided later. It can be decided and brought back in 2 weeks. There could be a motion it could be a motion to affirm the current leadership, or it could be a motion to approve a new board president. So really, the question that we have to deal with is reorganization, and then as a board, we decide. I know in the agenda item, there's a recommended language, but she mentioned that's really not something we have to follow. So yes, to answer your question more directly, if there isn't a motion, it could die, and the board member who placed this on the agenda, who is not here, could always request to have this at another board meeting.
Okay, so if we tabled it and tabled it with the specific motion of tabling it until a certain date, it would then reappear on that agenda. However, if we take no action, it could appear on an agenda if a board member put it on there again at some point, but wouldn't necessarily have to. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the ownership or the motivation would have to come from a board member to replace it, or the governing board to table the decision.
I'll just be honest about where I stand on this, or this is not the kind of thing that I want us to be dealing with and focusing on right now. I don't think any of us do. I'm not going to, I cannot comment one way or another to the intentions of a board member who is not here. And I do know that she has, has her personal reasons that are keeping her here, and I don't want to comment on those. But my concern, I don't believe that something that is done outside, something that's political necessarily having to do with elections should be brought into the organization of our governing board. The only concern and kind of question I have is, and has been all along, is the what's next. We now have 2 candidates who are on the ballot for 3 seats. And so I still don't entirely know what's next. I think I'd been told that there wasn't a possibility of a write-in, but now I'm told that there might be. Okay, so it appears to me that the governing board is going to have to appoint, obviously it's going to have to appoint a fifth governing board member at some point after the election. Do we know, Dr. Boyle, is it this current governing board? Is it the future governing board? We do have two members those two candidates who are on the ballot who are going to be on this governing board. And I guess the question is, should it be those who are outgoing who are having a say on who that new governing board member is versus should it be those people who are the new governing board members having a say on who it is that's appointed?
There are a set of regulations that come from the county attorney's office, and those regulations stipulate who would be on a committee to begin to just look at possible candidates and make a recommendation to the county school superintendent. Unless the regulations change between now and the election, because that fifth member or that fifth vacancy would be determined by the Board of Supervisors after the election. So at this point in reading the regulations, the stipulation would be, and I can't answer your question directly, and we do have a call or an email into the elections board asking some questions, would be the governing board president, the superintendent, and a representative from the teachers. And I'm not sure if it's the teachers union but there would be three representatives. They would, through a series of procedures, would make a recommendation to a top candidate and then two alternates. But very specifically, our guidance again from the county elections is that the county school superintendent would only be recommendations, and that person would make the decision, and it may not be any of those three recommendations. Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so in conversations that Dr. Boyle and I have had with Dr. Covey on the appointment process, there is a process which is new. In the past, the county superintendent appointed whomever he or she wanted. There is a new process, and it's actually being refined. And as we clarified with legal guidance, the county soup still maintains the authority to make the appointment. The governing board does not. But you will find in governing board policies, I think it's BBVE, but I'm not sure, we do have a Creighton board policy that on names being submitted for a vacancy, that this comes before the general governing board. So it's not something that happens behind closed doors. On top of that, just to emphasize the point that Dr. Boyle made, the process as prescribed right now is a consensus committee where the 3 to up to 6 members would have to come to consensus. It's not just like the top 2 out of 3 vote one way, but they have to agree entirely on submitting their top candidates. So it's a pretty solid process, and I think that there's other advocacy the district could do to lobby the county suit to uphold the decisions from the governing board and from that process. And he said that the vacancy wouldn't be declared till after the election. The process wouldn't probably start until Q1 next year with the new board.
So it sounds then like and the only reason I would ask or consider this would be if we are deciding tonight who it is that's making the recommendation on who that fifth governing board person is going to be. If that's something that is going to be the governing board president that will be elected in January, then I don't see a need to be reorganizing until that point. Even if that's something that we were to do prior to January, then it is helpful to know that there would be not only a committee, that it would have to be the superintendent and the head of the Grade Education Association in addition to the governing board president. But is what it sounds like, and I would have to look at that specific policy, that we would, as a board, meet and discuss who those candidates might be. Is that a process that you would be committed to, Mr. President, of having input from our entire board on who that other candidate would be, or who the candidates would be that would be forwarded to Dr. Kobe for appointment to this board?
So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is I feel I've demonstrated commitment to all our policies. I've never requested the board suspend policy for any reason. And I also feel that the integrity of the board lies in the investment of the community. And I have very strong ideas on how the community plays a role in sharing that decision. So if this happened under my watch, like, my commitment would be to not only invest the district governing board, but also our community in a legitimate process.
Thank you, Mr. President. That's very important for me to know, because we did have a candidate forum that was scheduled between the 4 candidates for the governing board, which would have been an opportunity for the community to hear from them. I understand that's not the case now, but if there are still opportunities, because there will still be one person who will be on this board next year, we don't know who that is. So to the extent that there are opportunities to involve the community as well and giving feedback, I think that's great, so thank you.
You're welcome. It's interesting, like, the district can do whatever it wants for the most part. The way that Arizona is invested in education is a lot of decisions are decentralized. And as it relates to this particular issue, I think there are a lot of ways to engage. One of the things that the committee would have to do would be advertise the position, which I don't think was ever done in the past. The district would be responsible to provide student achievement data, financial history, and create a vetting process. So I think it's a solid start to a good process for this unique situation. The motion was to table action. Is there a second? Hearing none, that motion dies. Is there any other further action this board would like to take tonight? It could be. I mean, here's the thing. We could, there still could be another motion before I move on.
Okay, for those in the audience, I am one of the people who did submit a petition, and I'd like to make my statement. Early this summer, 4 candidates for the 3 positions of Creighton School Board submitting their petitions. Mr. Zaragoza, with the local Democratic Party, challenged the signatures of 2 of the candidates. The two challenged candidates were not members of the Democratic Party. The 2 unchallenged candidates are registered Democrats. The results were the 2 challenged candidates are not going to be on the ballot. This is including me, and this is perfectly legal. This should upset everyone in the Creighton community. The board is nonpartisan, which means no political parties. I have served on this board for 7.5 years. I've served with Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. I have served on this board with people I don't know their political party affiliation. We are not here on the board to promote political parties' agendas. We should not owe any favors to one party or another. We serve for the Creighton School District. We should only be invested in the students' best interests. Mr. Zaragoza and the local Democratic Party has taken the voters' choice away from them. The voters now will not have a choice for 3 seats on the board. As for Mr. Zaragoza, as a current board president, he would have a strong influence in the selection of the third board seat, which will be vacant. He could even push to have himself appointed and totally circumvent the election process. Both candidates who will not be on the ballot are registered as independents. Personally, I am a liberal independent, and I vote for candidates who not only talk the talk, but walk the walk. That is, I vote for those whose actions reflect what I believe is the best. Since the actions of the local Democratic Party in excluding independents from the board, I am wondering if the local Democratic Party wants my vote or other independents. They are not walking the walk. When I began serving on the Creighton District School Board, Phoenix Union High School Board was having problems. Their school board was divided, and their meetings were one large argument. The only ones suffering were the students. Board members were too busy arguing with one another to consider the best interest of the students. I am truly sorry to see the board split. Mr. Zaragoza's actions have caused this, and he is responsible for the split board. He is not a unifying influence, but a divisive one. Sorry. You talk the talk, but cannot walk the walk. You tried to push your own agenda by trying to get the appointment for the upcoming vacant seat moved up, and tried to get this reorganization off the agenda. That is self-political opportunism. I give shame to the local Democratic Party for injecting partisan politics in a nonpartisan election. And shame on Mr. Zaragoza for being a willing pawn of their agenda and being talk but not walking, and putting politics above the students' best interest as the number one priority of this board. Okay. I have no confidence in his leadership, and I feel working for an entity that is not considering the best interest of Creighton School District or the students should not be the priority of our school board president. My suggestion for a more unified board is for the two current members, board members, who are not part of this dispute at all, to assume the mantle of leadership and keep partisan politics out of our board for the rest of this year. Thank you all.
Registered independent, never worked with the Democrats, and never been accused of collaborating with them. Seeing no further action, let's move on. Yes, ma'am.
We only have a few more meetings left of this school year, and I think we've done a really good job of being united as a board and working together on behalf of the students here in Creighton and doing the right thing for them. So I hope that we can continue to do that despite some uncomfortableness on the board. I do think that Carl's done a great job as a president, and he's really helped promote a lot of the positive things about Creighton throughout the community, and I really appreciate that. We need to have that positive voice about school and education, and particularly Creighton out there. And I think that Donna's been a wonderful board member as well, and I'm sorry to see her go, but I just hope that we can put this behind us and continue to do what we need to do for the students in the community.
Thank you, Governing Board. I
Just want to echo Tiffany's comments and say ditto.
Thank you. Moving on, our next agenda on the item is the approval of